Good morning. My section of this was written by Martin Luther King, and it was in a sermon that he delivered in April of 1959 at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. And this is an excerpt from that speech. Slavery was a tragic thing. All that the Negro had to look forward to was rows of cotton, sizzling sun, the whip of the boss, and the barking of bloodhounds. This is what he faced. It is tragic to be cut off from some things, but there is nothing more tragic than to be cut off from your language, cut off from your family, cut off from your roots, and this is what the Negro faced. Going over in ships out of Africa, huddled up in ships, not able even to talk to each other, thrown up and brought over to distant countries to work. Nothing in their past to hold on to, yet they are thrown here, and this is where they had to live. That's enough to beat anybody down. Keep them from ever becoming anything. Hold them back and keep them from ever giving to history any contribution. That's enough, isn't it? They had something left. The little preacher who didn't know his English grammar, who had never heard of Plato or Aristotle, who could never understand Einstein's theory of relativity, he'd look at them and say to them, "You ain't no slave, but you're God's children." They went out, and they left feeling that they were God's children. And they had a will to carry them on even amid the darkness of slavery. And sometime they would begin to walk around the field, and they knew that it was dark in their lives. They knew that they had to walk there so often in bare feet, but they pictured the day when they could lay down their burdens and they could sing, "I'm so glad the troubles don't always last." And then you could hear an echo saying, "And I know my robe going to fit me well because I tried it on at the gates of hell." By and by, I'm going to lay down my heavy load. These people, because of their creative, dynamic will, gave to this world something to keep it going. And they have given to this world contributions that the world will always have to be proud of. What gave to America the spiritual, which is the only original and creative music in this nation, gave to this world's generations of young men and young women who made marvelous contributions. Far out of the Black men and women of these dark days came a Marian Anderson, a Roland Hayes, a Paul Robeson. To sing until the very fiber of men's souls is shaken. Out of these men and women came a Ralph Bunche to stand as one of the great diplomats of the world. Out of these men came a Booker T. Washington and a W.E.B. Du Bois, a great educator. Out of these Black men and Black women came Charles Drew to save us with blood plasma all over his world. Out of these Black men and out of these Black women came an E. Franklin Frazier to interpret sociologically the trends of our age. One of these Black men and these Black women came a Paul Laurence Dunbar, a Conti Cullen, and a Langston Hughes to write poetry so that we can identify ourselves with reality through poetry. Out of these Black men and these Black women came something that keeps the generations going. If they had turned to the first method of bitterness, it wouldn't have come. If they had withdrawn and turned to silent hate, it wouldn't have come. But it came because of the creativity of the will and the dynamic quality of it and the determination to stand up amid all of those forces amid all of the darkness of human circumstance. Discover this. Go out anew into the experiences of life. But if you have the power and the dynamics of a human will, nothing in all this world can stop you. Why? Because you refuse to be stopped. You have the dogged determination to exist and the courage to be. And then he said, let us pray.
Thank you, Rob. And now Leela Clark.
Facing Our Hardships with Hope Lessons from Viktor Frankl by Tim Muldoon. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstance, to choose one's own way. For many years, my students at Boston College have read Viktor Frankl's sublime work, Man's Search for Meaning, a reflection on his experience at Auschwitz, and a sketch of the psychotherapeutic technique he developed from that experience. I wanted them to meet this remarkable man and to learn something about how his experience of extremity forced him to confront the stark choice between despair and hope, and to choose hope. The quote above is a snapshot of how he responded. To retain what he describes as the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstance, to choose one's own way. Frankl was a sober realist. He details the horrors of Auschwitz and the moral corruption of those who worked there. His philosophy was not about wishing away problems or pretending they do not exist, but rather to acknowledge them in their grim reality. Yet in spite of this realism, or rather because of it, he describes how holding on to hope was literally a life or death choice. Those who lost hope, he said, developed a certain look in their eye, a fatalism that inevitably ended in death. They experienced an existential vacuum. His term for a complete loss of meaning, loss of hope, a sense that nothing really mattered anymore. Fight that, he says, and find that which is a source of meaning. Perhaps it is a relationship with a loved one, or perhaps it is a task which one is called to do. Whatever it is, he writes, live into that meaning and discern what life demands of you. For in choosing to hold on to meaning, one's life will, perhaps surprisingly, unfold with beauty and purpose, even if the road is difficult.
Thank you, Leela. This is a poem by Reverend Julian Jamaica Soto, who is a Unitarian Universalist minister, activist, and organizer who currently serves as executive director of TRUST, the Transgender Religious Professional Unitarian Universalists Together. Yeah, big word. It's called the butterfly effect. I wish the knowledge were easier to come by, that individualism is just a scam, that you are always the butterfly wings. You are always the storm. Edward Lorenz, a weather scientist from MIT, is sometimes misquoted on this as the premise that the flap of a butterfly wing can cause a hurricane in a different part of the world. Shorthand that isn't all that close to a representation of the math turned weather scientist's work. He proposed that, should we make even a tiny alteration to nature, we will never know what would have happened if we had not disturbed it, since subsequent changes are too complex and entangled to restore a previous state, which is to say that you have an immeasurable effect on the system. It will change, and you will shape its DNA. You must not believe the lying lie that you do not matter, that whatever change you can organize is so insufficient as to not be worth your time, your energy, your life force. You must be willing to dream a dream that carries forward your community. This is how we rise. This day is polluted with a mistrust of truth, fertile and warm medium for unchecked cruelty and power. You must choose to scream the truth until every leaf and stone bears unrepentant witness to what happens when you try to cage and smash, to pin and frame a butterfly and their thousands and thousands of fabulous, flamboyant friends. And our next speaker is Kim. Yes, Ellen is going to speak. It's from the Book of Hope, A Survival Guide for Trying Times by Jane Goodall and Douglas Abrams, and it's excerpts that she's reading.
Jane Goodall. Jane Goodall is the world's most famous living naturalist. Equipped with little more than a notebook, binoculars, and her fascination with wildlife, Jane Goodall braved a realm of unknowns to give the world a remarkable window into humankind's closest living relatives. Through nearly 60 years of groundbreaking work, Dr. Jane Goodall has not only shown us the urgent need to protect chimpanzees from extinction, she has also redefined species conservation to include the needs of local people and the environment. Today, she travels the world, speaking about the threats facing chimpanzees and environmental crises, urging each of us to take action on behalf of all living things and the planet we share. In her book, The Book of Hope, A Survival Guide for Trying Times, Jane Goodall focuses on her 4 reasons for hope: the amazing human intellect, the resilience of nature, the power of young people, and the indomitable human spirit. The following is an excerpt from Jane Goodall's book, The Book of Hope, A Survival Guide for Trying Times. My message of hope is this: now that you have read the conversations in this little book, you realize that we can win these wars, that there is hope for our future, for the health of our planet, our societies, and our children, but only if we all get together and join forces. And I hope, too, that you understand the urgency of taking action, of each of us doing our bit. Please believe that against all odds, we can win out. Because if you don't believe that, you will lose hope, sink into apathy, and do nothing. During one of my visits to Tanzania, I attended an event where all the groups of the neighborhood came together to share their projects and socialize. There was a lot of laughter and a lot of enthusiasm. As the event wrapped up, everyone there got together and shouted out, "Together we can!" meaning together they could set the world right. I took the mic and told them, yes, absolutely we can, but will we? This startled them, but they thought about it and understood what it meant. I led them in a rousing, "Together we can, together we will." This is now the way they end all their meetings, and it has spread to other countries.
This is from an email by Robert Reich. and it's called the Trump-Vance-Musk Shock and Awe Plan is faltering. In all these ways and for all these reasons, the regime's efforts to overwhelm us are failing. Make no mistake, Trump, Vance, and Musk continue to be an indiscriminate wrecking ball that has already caused major destruction and will continue to weaken and isolate America. But their takeover has been slowed. Their plan was based on doing so much, so fast, that the rest of us would give in to negativity and despair. They want a dictatorship built on hopelessness and fear. That may have been the case initially, but we can take courage from the green shoots of rebellion now appearing across America and the world. As several of you have pointed out, successful resistance movements maintain hope and a positive vision of the future, no matter how dark the present. More than 55 years ago, I participated in the resistance to the Vietnam War, a resistance that ultimately ended the war and caused a once powerful president to resign. That resistance gave us courage, and we gave us courage we didn't know we had. It changed American culture, inspiring songs such as "The Times They Are A-Changin'" and "Blowin' in the Wind." Missing the other one. I got it right here. Comes from the original. There we go. Here, rank. Where's the rank? This happens when you print stuff. There you go. Where are you? Yeah, here we go. No one person led the anti-war movement. It was an amalgam of groups and leaders spanning more than 6 years of mobilization and organization at all levels of society. The civil rights movement that culminated in the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 required over 18 years of organizing, demonstrating, and mobilizing. We didn't have the internet then. We didn't have social media, so could be faster, all right? Current coup is less than 5 weeks old, and resistance has only begun. The Trump-Vance-Musk regime will fail. Even so, the democracy movement now emerging will require at least a decade, if not a generation, to rebuild and strengthen what has been destroyed, and to fix the raging inequalities, injustices, and corruption that led so many to vote for Trump for a second time. Those of you who want the leaders of the Democratic Party to step up and be heard, all right, of course. But political parties do not lead. The anti-war movement and the civil rights movement didn't depend on the Democratic Party for their successes. They depended on a mass mobilization of all of us who accepted the responsibilities of being American. We will prevail because we are relearning the basic truth that we are the leaders we've been waiting for. And now, Mark Hauenstein will give us words, the poem Miracles by Walt Whitman, who, by the way, was a Unitarian in Brooklyn, New York. And he is known as the Bard of Democracy.
Miracles. I know of nothing else but miracles. Whether I walk the streets of Manhattan or dart my sight over the roofs of houses toward the sky, or wade with naked feet along the beach, just in the edge of the water, or stand under the trees in the woods, or talk by day with anyone I love, or sleep in bed at night with anyone I love, or sit at a table at dinner with the rest, or look at strangers opposite me riding in the car, or watch honeybees busy around the hive of a summer forenoon. Or animals feeding in the fields, or birds, or the wonderfulness of insects in the air, or the wonderfulness of sundown, or the stars shining so quiet and bright, or the exquisite, delicate, thin curve of the new moon in spring. These, with the rest, one and all, are to me miracles. The whole referring, yet each distinct and in its place. To me, every hour of the light and dark is a miracle. Every cubic inch of space is a miracle. Every square yard of the surface of the earth is spread with the same. Every foot of the interior swarms with the same.
When I started putting this together, I decided we needed words of people who actually succeeded, okay, in their hopes. And all of these folks did succeed in hopes and dreams. And I consider this place to be a place of community and a place of connection. And I believe that now is an important time to connect to each other and to speak the truth, okay, and to gather and to activate ourselves in a political process that is important. Unitarian Universalism, by the way, believes in democracy and in the action of that democracy requires of us. And so I invite you all to be citizens of this country and speak your truth.